Hello, and thank you for joining me. I am Andrew Cook. I am the CEO of Ahead Business Support. And today we're going to talk about employee evaluations. The title of this session is Measuring What Matters. And we're going to discuss going from just evaluating employee performance to hopefully enabling better employee performance. And we're going to do that. We're going to look at the process that we've used in the past, some of those tools, the outcomes that those tools have brought us, and then where we can go from here for better outcomes. A little bit about me and my business before we start. Ahead Business Support is a consulting and coaching firm, and we empower small business owners to focus on their passions and goals. We do this through human resources operations and executive coaching, with the goal being to help build a robust and useful support network around small business owners, whether that's employees or vendors. The other sides of that are looking at and analyzing some of the business processes that small businesses use and making sure that those are really effective for the particular business. There are lots of great tools out there. They don't apply to everybody. And we want to make sure that rather than spending a lot of frustrating and time-consuming time for the owner working on back office things, that as much as possible is automated or just streamlined. And then finally, I know there's a lot of really passionate business owners out there who start a business because they're really good at something or they have a really deep desire to make a difference in this world. But that doesn't always mean they started out with all of the life lessons about what goes on in a business. And so part of the coaching aspect of that is just helping them build some confidence, ensure that they are using sound decision-making tools, and building up business literacy. There's an entire language all to its own in the business world, and we want to make sure that owners know what they are listening to. So we'll dive right in here. So performance evaluations, we had the right idea, but really what we end up with is the wrong execution. And so the purpose that we set out with, right, the right idea is we wanted the opportunity to assess an employee's progress. Are they improving? Are they learning? Are they being successful in their role? We wanted to be able to praise the employees. Sometimes we do that all in one lump at the once a year employee evaluation time, and the employee doesn't really feel valued the rest of the year. And so while the intention was really good there, I think the application didn't turn out as well as we had hoped. We want to improve performance, and we often talk about what needs to be fixed, but maybe not how to fix it. We want to set goals. We often focus solely on the goals of the business, but we don't really dive into the goals of the individuals as often as we should. And even if we do talk about their goals, maybe they don't know how to achieve what they're looking for. And as business owners, we have the ability to help our employees along. We also want to align expectations for the employee with company goals. And we don't do a great job of that. Right? Like we'll talk very specifically about, this employee needs to make X number of widgets a month, and whether they're successful at that or not, we don't tie them back into, hey, the company goal is to grow, and we're going to grow by, making a great product and providing excellent customer service. And so the person feels like I make widgets, but not I make a valuable product for the consumer and I help company growth by doing this. So what normally happens, and I'll give you some examples of what these conversations normally sound like. So some evaluations, the person comes in, sits down with the manager says, hey, Carol, great job this year. We really appreciate everything you've done for the business. Do you have any questions for me? No? Great. Thanks. And that was it, right? Like all we do is we sort of thank them for their time, but we don't give them a lot of uh, feedback on how they're doing or what they can improve, and the it just wastes time when that's all the conversation that we're having. We might focus on what they're doing wrong, and that leads to um, the Seinfeld clip on the right side of the slide there, like Festivus, I've got a lot of problems with you people, and now you're going to hear about it. And so the opposite of just like thanking somebody for everything they've done over the year is heaping on all the things they've done wrong, and they may not have been talked to by their manager or their direct supervisor about the things that have gone wrong, or they may not understand the severity or maybe the number of occurrences. And so I've always seen this where maybe HR or a supervisor, a manager does the performance evaluation, but then there's also like maybe a shift supervisor or a line manager in between those two. And so when the manager and the HR person say, hey, how has Bobby been doing at work? And that line supervisor, right, they just uncork. Oh, he's the worst. He's just been screwing everything up. And nobody says, have you talked to him? Is this documented? We've not been aware of this. They just go into the evaluation and say, hey, here's the feedback we got from your direct supervisor that you haven't been doing a great job. And Bobby at that point is sort of like blown away by the amount of things he's done wrong that he wasn't even aware of. The next conversation is that we'll tell them what to fix, but we don't ever give them a specific roadmap or help them develop that to get there. That conversation may sound like, hey, I need you to sell more widgets. And, the salesperson will understand, yes, that's their job to sell more, but they feel very like maxed out. Hey, I'm not finding new customers. I don't know what else to do. I'm getting these people who turn me down. And so rather than give them the tools and help to be more successful, to sell more, we just tell them, hey, you've got to get this together. You've got to do better. The next one is that we'll focus on our goal for the employee, sell more, but we don't really talk to the employee about what is it that they want. Maybe they don't even want to be in sales. Maybe they wanted to be part of the company and sales was a way that they felt like they could get in the door, but now they want to, they want to become a manager. They want to go work in operations and production. We need to talk to employees about what are their goals and figure out how we can support that. And then lastly, that idea again, hey, we focus on the individual, but we never really connect them to anything. So, hey, thanks for everything you've done this year. We think you're a really valuable part of the team. I hope you do the same thing again next year. But we haven't told them, how are they connected? How do they contribute to what the business success looks like? And we can certainly change and improve upon that. So here's what some of those evaluation tools have looked like, and this is not an exhaustive list. There are certainly variations on all of these things. We'll talk a little bit about that. The first one is a negotiated appraisal, and that uses a mediator. This is typically used when an employee and a supervisor, maybe they're butting heads or there's some friction there, and a mediator helps to make sure that the conversation is fair and balanced. That's it. That's what mediators do for us. It's probably pretty rare that you've seen this unless you've worked at a very large company and they felt like this was probably the best way to protect themselves legally. I don't love this idea, right? This is something has gone wrong for far too long, and that now we need a mediator to sit in on a simple employee evaluation. Management by objective. This is back to sales. This is probably what you typically have for salespeople. The objective is you need to sell $100,000, which means you need to sell $25,000 a quarter, and quarterly we'll meet together. We'll review, are you on track? Are you off track? Are you ahead? And what can we do to get you caught up if you're behind, right? And so there's a very specific metric. We're measuring that, and we're having frequent check-ins with that person about that. assessment center. So this is interesting. I've seen this in previous employment where we were testing very specific technical skills. So maybe it was report writing or some procedural item that those employees had to play out in a mock-up of a facility, and it allowed us to evaluate their knowledge, their technical knowledge of their job at that point. It didn't really evaluate some of the soft skills, the teamwork, all of that. Just really focused on technical skills at that point. Self-appraisals, pretty unreliable. You're either going to get people who think very, very highly of themselves and they can find no fault in anything they've done all year, and then the conversation with the manager where maybe there is a corrective action that needs to take place and they're sort of blown away. Hey, nobody's talked to me. I think I'm doing great. Or you could also get the opposite. You get somebody who just really thinks they're doing terribly, even though they're not. And so, that's also hard to evaluate if that's your only feedback point. Going one down to peer reviews, also sort of unreliable. You could have people who either don't like each other and those evaluations aren't going to be great, or people who are friends, in which case the evaluations are going to be pretty glowing again. So just need to be pretty aware that if you're using those as evaluation tools, take it all with a grain of salt. Peer reviews also come into play as part of what might be referred to as 360 evaluations, in which case a manager will evaluate their employees, but an employee will also evaluate their manager and maybe evaluate each other. It's the idea that you get a much better, well-rounded look at the employee then, right? You get to know, what does the employee think of the manager? What does the manager think of the employee? What do employees think of each other? And it can be a lot of data for HR to look at, but it can be valuable as well, just to get that full scope. The next item is a customer or client review, and this is really testing their, a frontline employees' client relations skills. How do they interact with our customers? And you typically see this played out through either secret shoppers or customer service surveys. This is also the rise of maybe you've been online and had somebody help you with something, and before they sign off, they say, "Hey, this is super important. Will you fill out this survey and tell them how much I helped you today?" They're probably getting evaluated on some portion of their customer service. And then finally at the bottom is the BARS, behaviorally anchored rating scale. And this was the idea or created behind the idea that managers might not always be unbiased or may not know how to be. It may not be that they are specifically seeking out to be malicious towards an employee, but if you told somebody rate so-and-so on a scale from 1 to 5, and you get one manager who thinks nobody's a 5, everybody is a 3. That's as good as you could get around here because you do not walk on water. But then the next manager thinks nobody's even below a 2. Everybody's doing pretty okay. And so if you have the same kinds of employees working between different areas in the company, you might have one whole section that their evaluations are just terrible, and it has nothing to do with their performance. It really has to do with the way that the manager views performance scales in general, right? Some greater philosophy. So BARS was designed to give very specific examples of this is what specific employee skills and attitudes would look like, right? So on the scale at the bottom of the screen there, a 1 would be the employee does not talk to or make eye contact with customers when they enter the store. The manager now knows, hey, if I see that this employee doesn't talk to customers, they do not make eye contact, we now have an employee who's a 1. All the way on the other side of the scale, a 5, employees cheerfully work with customers until they find exactly what they need. Again, if a manager can observe that an employee is doing that, there's no debate. This was demonstrated, and a appropriate evaluation can be made at that point. So let's talk about what the research tells us about all those tools. The WTW Consulting Survey, 26% of the companies say that their performance management system is not effective, right? Or I'm sorry, that they think 26% is effective. 1/3 felt that their efforts were, of employees felt their efforts were evaluated fairly. 93% of organizations said driving organizational performance was the objective, but that only 44% of them met that. 72% said that they have an objective to support employee career development, but only 31% actually accomplished that. So that's not great, right? Like those are pretty far off numbers. We're hoping for something and we're really not delivering on that at all. There was a Gallup survey that said 95% of our managers are dissatisfied with organizational review systems, and fewer than 20% of employees feel inspired by the reviews. Now, I don't know how important it is for somebody to feel inspired by a review, but 20% is a pretty bad number. And so I would at least hope that more of our employees felt like the evaluation process was really something that buoyed their day. Next is 47% of organizations said bias impacts evaluation of performance often or always. So we talked earlier about like that bar scale, right? Taking away bias. And so this is really saying like, hey, almost half of our organizations said that often or always bias plays a role. And then I don't know if you can see in the bottom of the screen because my head is there, but this is 1/3 of organizations believe there's a high correlation between, less than 1/3 of organizations believe there's a high correlation between the highest performing individuals and the highest performance evaluations, which says the people who get the best performance evaluations are not actually the high performing individuals. On the infographics on the right there, 1 in 4 workers admit that they'll leave their job if their performance reviews are subpar. And that probably shouldn't shock us, right? Like if they feel like everybody's telling them they're doing a bad job, they're not fitting in, I don't know that I would stick around in that environment. That's tough to hear. They would have to be really motivated not to go somewhere else. 55% of workers say annual performance reviews do not improve their performance. Yeah, and we'll talk about that. 85% of workers who have weekly check-ins with their managers report higher levels of engagement. So now we're talking about, rather than just talking once a year and being blindsided either by praise that we didn't know we got or criticism that we didn't get either throughout the year, this is saying, hey, people actually respond positively to more frequent contacts. Not saying a full-blown evaluation weekly, but just having those constant check-ins with a supervisor or a manager. And only 2% of workers who have weekly check-ins say they're disengaged. And so this is a big deal. Like this idea of disengaged employees, it has really come to the forefront with the idea of quiet quitting. We certainly want to believe that our employees are at work and they're invested in accomplishing the goals, but they may not know what the goals are, and they may not be communicating with anybody about how little they feel connected to our organization. So this idea of like more frequent contacts from a manager is something that we'll also talk about. So we really want you to pay attention to the evidence, right? Like we just talked through a number of surveys, and there are certainly far more out there that I could go and cite. But employers clearly understand that the evaluation process really isn't getting us what we hoped for. It's over a 100-year-old process at this point. And so all of those rating scales that you saw are really aimed at trying to create some of those changes, right? Like we know, hey, this come in and talk and that doesn't work. So we talk a little bit, how can we engage more in this conversation, right? Like, can we do the 360 reviews? We get more people involved and more people will comment on employee performance. We want to get input from the employee. We want you to do a self-review. Talk to us. Tell us how you think you're doing. We want to find some objectivity. We know that we're not being objective. So we give the bar scale to managers so that they are forced into, hey, these are the options. This is what it looks like. And then, setting goals. We talked about that goal-oriented sales type of managing to that specific objective, right? And what we find the problem ultimately is that we're always looking backwards at what had happened rather than looking forward to the next thing. And as the late Doris Roberts said, it's okay to look back, just don't stare. So we want to talk about replacing hindsight with foresight. And so it might help to think about the difference between management and leadership as which direction you're looking, right? And so we often talk about that which gets measured gets managed. And that really is talking about looking backwards. It's important. It's important to know where you've been. It's important to know if you're going in the right direction. And sometimes the best way to do that is to look back and see, are all the course corrections we made, are they working? Are they starting to point us in the right direction? But it's a very hindsight looking type of activity. We'll never get away from it. Not 100%. So don't think that you can not measure, not manage. Those are very needed. But in terms of employee evaluations, we really do need to be talking about looking forward. So we're going to talk about leadership now, right? And we want to be able to look into what's the next step that employees can take. And the workforce shows that they're ready for a shift in this discussion. Millennials and our Gen Z talk a lot about putting emphasis on receiving feedback and getting career development. A very tight labor market has forced employers to put an emphasis on employee retention. There's a big emphasis right now on work culture. And the reason why that's so important is that work culture is how we attract employees, right? Do employees want to be a part of our brand? Do they want to be a part of our culture? And how you manage performance and how you support career growth is a critical part of your work culture. And it is a critical part of attracting that next great employee. And then the opportunity to discover and correct low employee engagement, right? So we talked about the quiet quitters. We certainly don't want them to just come in, do the bare minimum, get paid, maybe the same as somebody who's really trying hard. And having the right discussion allows us to identify those people and either get them back on track or let them find the job that will make them excited. So it all starts with goal setting. And this is one of those things that businesses don't always do particularly well or do very clearly. And so ideally, employees would understand the greater business goals, short-term, long-term, near-term, and they would have goals that are very specifically tied to that business goal. And so hate to always talk about business goals being money oriented, but let's say it's a sales goal, right? And so the business says, hey, we want to grow by $100,000 in the coming year. And the sales employee gets a goal that says the business's goal is to grow by $100,000. You're going to own half of that as part of your goal for the coming year. You owe us $50,000 and this is how we'll get there. And so that's a very direct tie between, hey, this is the company's goal and this is how I contribute to it. That gets a little more difficult when you have employees that um, maybe they dig holes, right? And you're a construction company. And as the owner, you need the right hole to pour a sound foundation for the buildings that you're going to build. And that employee needs to understand that without the right hole, the building will not stand, right? Won't pass inspection, wasted time, wasted money. And so they will appreciate how important their work is. They're not just digging holes. They're contributing to the construction of a building in a very important way. So being able to tie people's individual goals to the business goals as a whole is really important, but you have to have the right business goals so that you can make sure that they tie to that. Really want to talk about SMART goals for just 2 seconds. Hopefully you've heard of this before. If you haven't, this is a great, simple tool to figure out whether you're creating goals that are probably going to make sense for your business, right? And so we talk about specific, the idea of we're going to make more money is not specific. If you have the idea of we're going to make $100,000, that becomes specific, right? Measurable. We're going to make people happier. You might be able to measure that. You may be able to do customer satisfaction surveys. But if you don't know how you're going to measure it, those kinds of ideas about like creating feelings can be pretty difficult to measure in the end. And so we do want to make sure that we're really making some kind of measurable goal. Attainable. Hey, look, yes, we want to end world hunger. I get that. But is it attainable? I don't know that it is, right? Not at your individual business level. You can contribute to it. And maybe the better goal around something like that, around ending hunger, would be, right, we're going to deliver 200,000 meals in the next 12 months. Right? Whatever that metric is. So now you have specific, you have measurable. Is it attainable? But it's probably a lot more attainable than saying you're going to end world hunger. Is it relevant? So this talks really about if you're a construction company and the goal is to make people happy, that may be a byproduct, but it may not be relevant. Because you're going to have a really, really hard time explaining to your carpenter who's swinging a hammer in 90-degree weather about how their job makes somebody happy. You're going to have a hard time measuring it. So while I think those are good aspirations, in terms of company goals, that may not work well for that specific company. So we want to make sure that the goal is relevant and then time constrained, which really just means, do we know when the deadline is? So we talked a little bit earlier about, hey, we're going to produce 200,000 meals in the next 12 months. It's measurable. I know how long it's going to take me to get there. It's attainable. It's relevant if my business is making meals for, people who are hungry. That sets a good goal, right? And then from there, you can spin off and you can create specific goals for your employees that tie back to the greater business. They understand how they contribute at that point. So why focus on this? Why does it matter? The research shows us that if you focus on these goals and how they contribute to something bigger, it provides that individual with opportunities for teamwork. They understand not only how do I contribute to the mission, but that we are all contributing to this mission now. There's accountability for attainment, because now I understand if I don't do my job and we don't make those 200,000 meals, I'm accountable for that. I've contributed directly to the failure of the business. And just feeling connected to something bigger, right? Digging a hole every day can make you feel like you're not connected to something. But if you know you're digging a hole for a foundation and that building that's going up is a hospital that's going to treat cancer, I mean, like, you can really tie this in so that your employees do have this really great feeling of connectedness to the goal of the business. All right, so involving our employees, we've talked about that a little bit. The best way is to ask questions. And so here's a list of questions. I'll go through a couple of them. Please feel free to review these at your own pace. These are certainly not the only questions that you can ask. They are good starter questions. If I was going to specifically design an employee evaluation for a business, I would look at these, but I would also want to tailor it to the business, to those goals, to the ideas of what we're trying to accomplish. So, if the business goal is 200,000 meals a year, then how does your job support this goal? So the question behind this is, you explain to me how you contribute to this mission. And if they can't get there, then as the manager, the owner, I need to go back and figure out how to connect those dots for the employee, how to get them connected to my business, how to get them engaged, right? How can we measure the work? So if we talk about, hey, this is the goal, maybe you need to get their input on, like, how is it that we would measure, your work productivity every day? And they may have really interesting ideas. They're the ones who handle the data that they process every day, whether that's widgets made, holes dug, meals cooked. And there may be a really smart way for them to measure what they're accomplishing. And if they know you're watching it, or if they know that you're measuring it, then they will be inspired to take part in that. Asking them what their workplace goals are. This is always a great check-in. Over the years, I've always had employees who are either going back to college because they want to change careers, or maybe they have aspirations to start their own business. That's certainly happened from time to time. And so, we as owners have the opportunity to either connect employees to resources, give them some training. If what they want to do is they want to open a business someday, you are in a position to start giving them some knowledge about what it looks like to own a business today, what your experience is. That's going to be helpful for them. And because they have that indispensable resource at your business, they're going to stay with you as long as they can, so they can learn, right? Like, that's the ultimate goal, is to keep people for as long as we can, but not longer than is healthy for any of us. It's always good for our employees to move up and move on at some point. So what do you need to learn to meet your goals, right? If they have the goal, hey, I want to open my own business. Okay. What do you need to learn, right? As a business owner, what can I help teach you? Do you need to look at financial reports? Do we need to talk about what a profit and loss report looks like and what's on there and how do you evaluate it? Do we need to talk about securing an IT support service provider? What is it that individual needs to learn, and then how can we work that into their work around the office, right? Maybe they start to spend a little bit of time working in accounting. Obviously supervised, we want all the data to be correct, but if there's a way that we can take a couple hours a week and help those people along, it certainly is a good investment. Asking questions like, what skills do you have that we could use more effectively? I bet that comes up with a lot of interesting answers. Almost certainly, employees know what it is that they are good at. And their hobbies outside of the work environment may directly contribute to something really good happening in the workplace, right? If you own a bakery and you have somebody that in their off time, they make TikTok videos, social media marketing is so important. If they can just work that into their workday at the bakery and help boost your marketing efforts, like that's a great thing to know. But we don't get there unless we ask the question. My dog has 500,000 followers. Can you help me get the bakery to 500,000 followers, right? So asking the questions about what additional skills can they bring to the table doesn't necessarily mean you got to pay them for it. I mean, some of those things may not be, I don't know. I've had employees that love gardening, and they wanted to help with landscaping around the buildings. And so we would give them money to go out and buy flowers, and they would plant them, and they got to do something that they loved, that they felt proud of. They could tell their coworkers, hey, I'm the one who planted this flower bed. It was nothing for us as a business to allow that and to pay for it, right? Like in that person felt more ownership in the business because they knew, like, I'm responsible for beautifying these flower beds. And asking questions like, what can I do as the manager that would be the most or least helpful when it comes to helping you complete your work? Employees would probably be a little bashful about questions like that at first. It can feel a little unsafe to ask the manager to be less micromanager. But if you make it safe for them to give feedback, I think you will start to learn, hey, in these instances, I really need your help talking to angry clients because I don't have the authority to deal with it, right? And so while I know that you don't want to, you don't want to necessarily do that, but like I, as the employee, I just need your help in those moments. And that's where those conversations can come out. And obviously we don't want this process to be just a once a year thing. Hopefully if it's designed correctly, it can be engaging, enriching. I don't think it has to take an hour per person by any means. In fact, a lot of companies, as I was doing my research, talked about taking employees out to lunch one-on-one, supervisor employee, maybe that's the quarterly check-in, or that's the half-year check-in, whatever. Weekly 5-minute meetings with the manager. That doesn't need to be so formal. If your managers will just get up and walk around and spend time one-on-one with people, figuring out, how can I clear the log jams that are in your way, and then go work on those diligently. So don't want you to wait a whole year to address all these items. Celebrate the victories in the moment, provide correction in the moment, and that's tough. Obviously, I love ideas like teachable moments, right? Somebody screwed something up and you have the ability to just like stop and say, hey, we're going to learn about this right now. Pull up a chair. Let's look at what happened, what we can do to do it better. And I know how much time that takes from a manager, a leader, an owner to have those conversations over and over and over again. It's necessary. And if you just wait to dump all of that once a year, it's not going to go well. And then also providing context. And I always think of this in terms of parenting, right? Why can't I put a fork in the wall outlet? Because I said so. Well, that's not, you don't need to provide any context for why that's dangerous or why that's not a good idea. And I think so often, again, because we get busy, because we're not managing schedules well, we talk to employees that way, even when we don't mean to. We don't slow down. We don't explain, hey, I want you to do this other thing. I don't tell you why. I just tell you, don't call that person, call this person. And so the employee doesn't have a chance to integrate and learn and find out what they're doing wrong or what they could do better in the moment, right? Like not just wait for a year and then you sit them down and say, well, last year I had to tell you 12 times not to call this person, to call that person. But you never told them why. So they couldn't do any critical thinking on their own. All right. So, as a manager, before you sit down and talk to your employees, just a few things that might be helpful for you to think through. Again, I'm not going to read through all of these. You can review them at your own pace. But of all of the surveys through the Brandon Hall Group, these were the questions that managers most often asked themselves before they went into employee evaluation. So not just walking in blindly, but actually sitting down and giving this process some thought before you go into it. Would I promote this individual right now if I could? What development opportunities can I offer? Again, you need to know your person to know whether those developmental opportunities are something that you can offer. Would I give the highest salary increase to this individual? How difficult is this employee to replace? I have been amazed at businesses where truly, if they sat down, they looked at it, the most important person they have in their office is maybe the secretary, who is the inevitable keeper of secrets, right? Where are these things kept? Only that person knows. Who do we call when X doesn't work? Only that person knows. And everybody has spent 25 years around that person saying, hey, where are the envelope labels? And that person stands up and they go and they get them. Nobody else learns where everything is located. And so, having a realistic conversation about, how many secrets does only this person know and nobody else here has any clue about, that makes that person pretty important. It's not about whether you can hire a new secretary. You absolutely can, right? That's not the question that's being asked. The question is, how hard is it going to be to replace the person? Not the position, the person. And then, what's the person's flight risk? How likely is it that if we don't pay them better, we don't treat them better, that they're going to go find another place to work? More and more, I think the answer to that question is highly likely, whether we want to admit it or not. All right, so that was it. Lots to think about, no specific answers today. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. I do offer 1 hour free consultations for prospective clients. So if you have an HR question or you want to talk about your specific employee evaluation process, there's my contact information right there. And if you're interested in learning more, I will be doing an entire series of HR management operations info sessions throughout the rest of 2023. And if that goes well, then, maybe for the foreseeable future as well. I hope you join us. Citations for all my sources are there below. And thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you learned something and have a great day.